I didn't lose my voice overnight. I gave it away slowly. That's what makes this kind of story dangerous. You don't notice it while it's happening. My name is Ethan. I was 39 years old when I realized that being reliable can quietly turn into being invisible. I didn't come from money. I didn't come from connections. I came from consistency. I grew up watching my father work 2 jobs and never complain. He believed that if you showed up every day and did your best, people would notice. I believed him. For most of my adult life, that belief seemed to work. I wasn't loud, I wasn't charismatic, but I was dependable. After college, I joined a mid-sized nonprofit organization in Chicago. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. Community outreach, education programs, real people, real impact. I started at the bottom. Data entry, grant reports, behind-the-scenes work no one ever applauded. And I was fine with that, because I believed effort spoke for itself. Over the years, I became the person people relied on when something went wrong. If a deadline was missed, I fixed it. If a report was flawed, I corrected it. If someone dropped the ball, I picked it up. Quietly. That was my mistake. I trained everyone to expect me, but never to credit me. When new leadership arrived, everything shifted. Not abruptly, politely. The new director, Martin, was impressive. Confident, articulate, well-connected. He spoke in polished sentences and smiled at the right moments. People gravitated toward him instantly. I watched from the sidelines, adjusting to his style. At first, he seemed appreciative, nice enough. He asked questions, listened carefully. Then he started repeating my ideas, almost word for word. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then it happened again and again. In meetings, I'd mention a concern. Martin would restate it minutes later, louder, smoother. People nodded. They thanked him. I sat quietly. I told myself it wasn't worth making a scene. I told myself the work mattered more than recognition. That belief kept me silent longer than it should have. One afternoon, a donor meeting was scheduled, a big one. Months of preparation went into it. I had written the proposal, outlined the strategy, anticipated objections. Martin presented it. My name never came up. After the meeting, applause filled the room. Martin smiled modestly. Someone said, "Great vision." He nodded. "Team effort," he replied. But when credit is always collective and blame is personal, something is wrong. Weeks passed. I felt myself shrinking, not because I lacked ability, because I lacked presence. People stopped asking for my input directly. They asked Martin. He filtered. He decided. I existed in drafts and footnotes. One evening, I stayed late at the office. The building was quiet. I opened a document I had written years ago, a personal statement for a fellowship I never applied for. In it, I had written a sentence that stopped me cold. I want to do work that reflects who I am, not what people assume I'll accept. I closed the document. That version of me felt distant, but not gone. The next morning, something changed, not externally, internally. I stopped volunteering information. I answered questions directly, but briefly. I watched, listened, observed how decisions were made, who benefited, who disappeared, and slowly a pattern emerged. Martin wasn't just taking credit, he was consolidating control. By positioning himself as the voice of the teen, he became the gatekeeper of opportunity. I wasn't the only one affected. I was just the quietest. The moment everything shifted happened during a crisis. A major grant was flagged for review, funding at risk, Programs threatened. Panic spread. Emails flew. Martin called an emergency meeting. He spoke confidently, reassuringly, but I knew something he didn't. The issue wasn't procedural, it was ethical, and it was traceable to a decision Martin had made, a decision he didn't fully understand. As the room buzzed with worry, I felt something unexpected, calm. Because for the first time in years, I saw clearly. I could fix this, but I had a choice. I could save the organization quietly, again, or I could let the truth surface. I didn't decide right away. I went home that night and sat in the dark thinking about my father, about consistency, about silence, and about the cost of being dependable without being visible. The next morning, I walked into the office knowing one thing for certain. This time, I wouldn't disappear. The crisis didn't wait for anyone to feel ready. By mid-morning, emails from the funding agency began arriving with sharper language, requests for clarification, demands for documentation. Martin remained calm on the surface. He scheduled meetings back to back, spoke confidently, reassured everyone that it was under control. But I noticed something others didn't. He avoided specifics. When questions became technical, he deflected. When details mattered, he generalized. That was when I knew. He didn't fully understand the problem he had created. The issue traced back to a reporting change Martin had approved months earlier. He'd framed it as streamlining. In reality, it blurred a line the funder cared deeply about. I had flagged it then, quietly, in writing. The email was still in my sent folder, unanswered. At the emergency meeting, voices overlapped. People speculated. Someone suggested bringing in an external consultant. Martin nodded, appearing thoughtful. I sat still. Not frozen, focused. I could speak up right then, expose the mistake, clarify the solution. But experience had taught me something painful. If I spoke too early, the fix would become his idea, and I would remain invisible. So I waited, not to punish, to choose wisely. By afternoon, the tension had spread beyond our department. Senior staff were pulled into calls. Programs were paused. People looked tired, afraid. I received a direct message from a colleague. "Do you know what's actually going on?" I typed a response, then erased it. Instead, I replied, "I'm looking into it." That was true. I pulled together documentation, policies, previous approvals, correspondence. I built a timeline, not to assign blame, to show causality. Late that afternoon, Martin asked to speak with me privately. His office was spotless, too controlled. "I know you've been involved with these reports for years," he said. "Can you take a look and see if anything stands out?" There it was, the invitation. Not recognition, utilization. I nodded. "I already have," I said. He leaned forward. "And?" I replied, "The issue isn't formatting, it's classification." He frowned slightly. "I don't follow." I explained it carefully, step by step. His confidence faltered. "Can we adjust it quietly?" he asked. Quietly. That word again. "Not without acknowledgement," I said. The funder asked directly. Silence filled the room. Martin exhaled. "Well," he said, forcing a smile, "we're a team." I met his eyes. "Yes," I said, "we are." But something in my tone made him pause. He sensed the shift. I returned to my desk and finished preparing the corrective report. Clear, accurate, traceable. I included references, dates, approvals. I didn't highlight names. I let the facts do that work. Before sending it, I hesitated. Once this went out, there was no returning to quiet support. I thought about the years I had stayed invisible, about the donor meeting where my work had been praised without my name. I clicked send, not to Martin, to senior leadership. The response was immediate, a meeting request, within minutes. This time, Martin wasn't leading, he was attending. As I walked into the room, I felt something unfamiliar, not fear, alignment. For the first time, the truth wouldn't need translation, and whatever happened next, I knew one thing. I would no longer disappear to protect someone else's comfort. The room was already full when I arrived. Senior leadership sat along one side of the table. Legal counsel joined remotely. Martin sat near the end, hands folded, posture controlled. No one spoke at first. Then the director asked me to walk them through the report. I didn't rush. I explained the issue plainly, what it changed, why it mattered, how it affected compliance. I didn't accuse. I clarified. When I finished, the room was quiet again. This time it wasn't confusion, it was understanding. One of the board members asked Martin a question. When was this decision approved? Martin answered carefully. He referenced timelines, framed the change as collaborative, emphasized intent. I listened. Then the legal counsel spoke. The documentation shows the concern was raised prior to approval, she said, by Ethan. Every eye turned toward me. I didn't react. I had already lived this moment privately for years. Another board member leaned forward. Why wasn't this escalated at the time? He asked Martin. Martin hesitated, only briefly. We didn't feel it warranted concern then, he said. That answer didn't land the way he expected. The director nodded slowly. Now it clearly does, she said. The meeting shifted, not dramatically, decisively. Next steps were outlined. A corrective disclosure would be issued. Oversight processes would be reviewed. Then the director looked at me. I want you involved in the follow-up, she said. Not as support, as lead. Martin's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't object. He couldn't. The room had already adjusted. After the meeting, people approached me quietly, not congratulating, acknowledging. One colleague said, I didn't know you had raised that before. I did. I just didn't insist. That distinction mattered. In the days that followed, the atmosphere changed. People asked me questions directly, included me in decisions earlier, not because I demanded space, because I occupied it. Martin became more distant, not hostile, careful. One afternoon, he asked to speak with me again. This time, his tone was different. I didn't realize you felt sidelined, he said. I considered that sentence carefully. I didn't feel sidelined. I was sidelined. He nodded slowly. I know, but intention doesn't change impact. He didn't argue. He couldn't. Over the next few weeks, leadership initiated a broader review. Processes changed, credit attribution became formalized, decision paths became transparent. I was asked to help design the new framework, not because I had complained, because I had demonstrated clarity under pressure. One evening, as I left the office, I realized something quietly profound. I hadn't won. I had aligned, and alignment feels different than victory. It doesn't inflate you. It steadies you. I went home that night and opened the old document again, the one with the sentence about doing work that reflects who you are. I added a line beneath it, and refusing to disappear to make others comfortable. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for recognition. I felt like I had already arrived. The correction was submitted within the week. Clear, transparent, complete. The funding agency responded with something unexpected: respect. They didn't praise us. They didn't punish us. They acknowledged the honesty. Programs resumed. Trust stabilized. Inside the organization, something fundamental had shifted. Meetings felt different, not louder, more precise. People paused before speaking. They referenced sources. They checked assumptions. The culture didn't change overnight, but the direction did. Martin stayed in his role. He wasn't removed. He wasn't humiliated, but he was no longer untouchable. Authority, once exposed to light, behaves differently. He consulted more, documented more, and for the first time, he asked questions he didn't already assume answers to. We worked together professionally, not closely, respectfully. That distance was intentional. It allowed clarity without resentment. A few months later, leadership offered me a new position. Not a promotion in title, a shift in scope. Oversight across multiple programs, direct access to decision makers. They called it institutional continuity. I called it visibility. I accepted without hesitation, not because I needed validation, because I was done shrinking. The first day in the new role, I stood in the same meeting room where I had once sat silently. Nothing about the room had changed. The table, the chairs, the lighting. Only my posture was different. I spoke when clarity was needed. I listened when others spoke. I didn't dominate. I participated. That was enough. Outside of work, something else changed too. I stopped explaining myself. When people asked how things were going, I didn't soften the truth. I stepped into my work, I said. Most nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. That was fine. Not everyone benefits from your presence. One evening, walking home, I thought about the version of myself who believed that being reliable meant staying quiet. He wasn't wrong. He was incomplete. Reliability without visibility is labor without dignity, and dignity matters. If you are listening to this and feeling unseen, if your ideas are filtered, softened, or repeated without your name, know this: silence is not always humility. Patience is not always wisdom. Sometimes the most responsible thing you can do is speak clearly and stand still long enough for others to see you. You don't need to announce yourself. You just need to stop disappearing. Because when the truth is solid, it doesn't need volume. It needs space. And once you claim that space, quietly and without apology, the world adjusts. Not all at once, but enough.